Hello everybody, Agne here, and today, as per a discussion that we had in a voice call the other day, I'm going to be discussing why my charts and my specification of ants differ from others and how I specifically specify various ants. Let's get right into it. Alright guys, so like I said in the little intro, today we're going to go into like how I specify ants and why my specification charts of ants differ from a lot of different other YouTubers and official and etc. to try to give you an understanding of how I break down ants and what I'm looking at versus what a lot of other content creators and ants official are looking at. But before we get into that, got to get into the shenanigans. So today's video is sponsored by AppToy. We're using my code AGNE6. You can get anywhere from 5 to 65% off all in-game purchases. It's a great way to save a little money, show some support, and just get things cheaper. So if you continue to love playing this game, as long as your Android, iOS is coming out soon, just a great way for you to keep saving money to be able to get things that you want. You know, whether you be a light spender or something, you're spending a lot less on getting the few packs that you do. So again, that's AGNE6 through AppToy. The full description of how to do so will be down in the description down below, as well as links to various things such as the Discord. Discord is a great thing. We got a great community to where you can go and ask questions, post video ideas, etc., and get any answer you need. We have voice calls there, and it's just a great community to be around. Speaking of helping out, there's still 65.7% of the people that watch my videos on a weekly basis that are not subscribed. They don't hit that like button. They don't comment. It really does help out. I hate to be that kind of YouTuber that asks that kind of thing, but it really does help out to not only push us further up in the YouTube algorithm, but also lets us know what kind of content you are looking for. So hit that like, hit that subscribe, comment. It all helps us out. All right. So we'll get right into it. So I look at things a lot differently than a lot of different YouTube creators and the Ants official. So a lot of times when people are trying to give you a best lineup, they're going for a 1v1 situation, where I'm looking at more of how long can this troop survive versus some of these 1v1 situation ants in a manner like Island or Barrens, to where you're trying to successively take several hits before you are removed. So how do I break that down? Well, I'll tell you that. So I look at several different factors. The very first one being survivability. That's something that you're going to need, especially if you're trying to last a long time in the tower or anything else like that, is how long can you actually survive off that particular ant in said tower. The next thing that I'm looking at is control or control resistance. Both play hand in hand and have a huge factor on the sway of the battle. The next thing that I'm looking at is what a support class is. Most everyone's March has some kind of support class anymore. So what is it supporting exactly? Does it mesh well with your build? And then the last thing that you look at is your pure damage, your DPS is what it's called. In other games, it's called DPS, which would be damage per second, but for the sake of the argument of this video, that's just the term that we're going to use. All right, so let's get into the first one. Survivability. What factors into survivability? There's several things that factor into survivability. Some of it being from some of the ants that you have, whether it be from defense added, health added, some of the different skills that they might have, such as like with the added sextants with the skill damage, which is increasing the DPS, but then has a chance to be able to have a shield that makes the squad immune to the next damage taken. All of that factors into survivability, especially when you have it like in the front row, to where it's the one that is taking the majority of your enemy's squad damage against it very early in the battle. So all of those type of things factor in survivability. Other things that could factor in survivability is the minimal benefit that healing gives, and mostly like the shield effect, the ability to dodge, those sort of things. Defense, obviously, health increase. Those things factor into your survivability factor of what I classify with ants. So then we go into the next one, control and control resistance. So with control and control resistance, it's obviously your different controls to where you have, disarm and confuse. Some of the other ones I'm drawing a blank off the top of my head, to where you're countering or putting them in a stasis of some point to be able to basically limit their skill use. Whereas on the counterpart would be your control resistance, to where you're able to either, like the Go stand, for instance, let me find that one, where you're able to use the wake effect to be immune from control effects like silence, disarm, suppress, confuse, etc., etc. So those are the things that I'm looking at as far as that, for different factors that honestly tie hand in hand into survivability and other factors that we're going to talk about later in this video. The next classification I look at would be what kind of support class it is. So if you look at ones like Attosexans, for instance, what I mean by a support class is like it's skill 8, to where it's putting all of your shooter ant squads that you have in that into splash damage, the damage ratio of 100%. So things that are affecting the rest of your squad in that battle to be able to stack up and do even more damage. Ada is actually a great one, especially for like a guardian shooter, which I am, to be able to add that extra support role into what the conflict is. So by support, that's what I mean, is something that actually boosts your other lines in that conflict, which allows obviously for you to be able to not only hit harder but survive longer, etc., etc. There's different ants that, like, as their defense goes down, that increase the attack, things like that. That's things that are all classified as a support. And last but not least is just your pure damage. So, I mean, you have the obvious damage dealers like Golden Crystal and Saharan Silver, things that just purely put out pure damage. Okay, so where does this come into play with why my thoughts differ with Ants Official and other content creators, and honestly, some even the whales? So a lot of people, they're looking at that one hitter. So if you go, the way that this argument in this video came about is because I was talking to somebody in our Discord voice chat, and they were talking about the use of like Black Knight in the front versus where I use Ada. And there's a big reason behind that, because for me, I'm looking at survivability in the hit. Whereas if you look at the Black Knight, skill 2 is a very good indication of what I'm trying to say. So the damage is taken by a squad significantly reduced by 45%. Okay, so that is a survivability right there, right? The effect decreases by 3% every time that the squad takes damage. That's a problem, because there's possibility of each ant up to doing 12 to 13 skill damages per fight, up to actually 20 in some cases. So when you're doing the math on that, you're decreasing that very significantly, very fast, to where by round 2 in the fight, it's already depleted. Now, it does, when the effect decreases to 0, deals 800% damage to all enemy squads. Now that classifies it more as a DPS ant at that point. So it's kind of a survivability and DPS into one. Now, where does that play into factor with what I'm saying? Now, the problem with that is because it essentially is relying on the fact of it getting hit or its shield being torn down to be able to actually disperse the damage. It's basically a one-hit wonder type scenario. It might go through a few people because, you know, it's gonna, especially with the whales and stuff, it's gonna have a high packing power as far as the fight. But when you're looking at survivability as far as, say, just for your front line, using something like the ATA with skill 2, it has a 45% skill damage, and then after releasing a combat skill, has 60% chance to gain a shield to make the squad immune to the next damage taken. So per round, you essentially have a chance to be able to negate the damage completely. Now, it does need a little reworking. I do agree. You know, as new stuff comes out, they're always changing things and making it more difficult to really pinpoint how these things are. But then you go into, so you want a combination of all those as far as survivability. If you guys are on board with what I'm trying to say about building like the proper squad and such. So what's the other factors that you can really take into? So for me, I don't have like a high level heart and silver. So I got to look at that fact that there's others that do. So like for me, I need to look at the fact, okay, I'm going to have ATA, but I'm still going to need another support ant to be able to, in survivability ant, really to be able to go into my line 2, to be able to allow the strongest ant that I have at the time to be able to make the most amount of DPS. So that's why for mine, I have for my Clara, which has various different support skills and survivability skills. So it has, you know, reducing the skill damage, which is important when you're facing like Saharan Silver, because the Saharan Silver is a very high DPS ant. Then it has, you know, your defense, and then it has the support to be able to increase their additional skill damage. So your backline's basically able to do way more. And then it has the heal ratio thing, but that, but it also has the ability to stack additional skill damage to the shooter squad in the back line. So those are different factors. So that kind of covers both, not only your support, but your survivability at the same time, because it's kind of taking on two roles. Now, this is where I catch a lot of different flack as far as like my particular build, which actually does quite well. So for me, like I said before, I don't have a high level silver Saharan, else I would probably take out the Formica Clara and put in Emerald Jewel and then Saharan Silver. As I don't have that, so I need to look at ways to be able to basically counter that. So what I actually run is I run Emerald Jewel in the back. And if you honestly look at it, it's not so much of a support as it is a medium level DPS, but it has one thing that really goes for it. And that's the skill 2, has a chance to enter stealth. And the first skill trigger will certainly be a critical hit and inflict an exhaust effect on the enemy, lasting 2 rounds, and the effect is stackable. So you kind of have a bunch of survivability and support all in one, plus then you have the Emerald Jewel that also has a survivability on it while inflicting DPS. So it kind of plays hand in hand. Of course, then you got the other skills that have like the shooter and attack, 75% chance to be able to do high damage to the enemy backline, which is always good because that's usually the DPS dealer anyway. And then, you know, 80% chance to do 280 damage to 2 random enemy squads and reduce the target's health. The damage is increased by 1% up to a maximum increase of 100%. So these are all things that you're looking at, and this is why, like, what my classifications of ants are a lot different. Like, for me, even though I do agree that the Black Knight would be better on a 1v1 basis as far as survivability in a long-term fight, like when you come to barrens or island or anything like that, I would actually put it lower than the Saxon. And I've caught many arguments over it over time, but until you can kind of look at it as on an even playing ground, either like from the same account or such, to where you can kind of see the difference in it when it's paired with other ants. So if you're looking at it one by one, absolutely, the Black Knight is fucking way stronger than the ATA. But when you look at what the support and survivability is when paired with other ants, and that's something you got to look into when you are trying to decide what you're trying to set up. So if you're trying to set up, for instance, a one-hit wonder, like for duels and glory and all that, that's a completely different build than you would for, say, surviving in a tower like on Warrior Kings or the SVS events, or in a tower on the island, where actually Guardian March is one of your best bets, just for the survivability factor alone. Plus the stat increases from Warrior Kings and all the different factors that we can get into that in a different video, and I have discussed in previous videos before. But that is why I classify ants a lot differently than what other people do, because I'm not looking at the one-hit wonders. I do know when ants are stronger in a 1v1 situation, but I'm never looking at a 1v1 situation. I'm always looking at survivability, whether your heal's being hit or on island or in a tower, etc. Plus the combinations that can be made with it to be able to make it that much stronger. Alright, well, this was a little bit longer of a video than I was expecting it to be, but hopefully it's informational to kind of give my thought process and, the advice that I give, to be able to help you out a little bit more. With that being said, Agnes out, and we'll see you in the next one.